Hello and welcome to another episode of the Executive Hub Show. Your host Mustafa Hosseini here at Executive Hub Show. Our aim is to help you grow your business with tips and strategies from successful entrepreneurs from around the world. My guest today is the one and only Verne Harnish. Welcome, Verne.
Mustafa, it's great to be on the show.
Great to see you and great to have you. And I look forward to our conversation about scaling up our businesses and why only a few companies to scale and the rest don't. Let me do the proper introduction for Verne Gang, and we're going to dive into a very interesting conversation. Verne Harnish is the founder of the world-renowned Entrepreneurs Organization, or what some people call EO, and Scaling Up, a global coaching and executive education firm. The Global Scaleup Fellow in the Entrepreneurship Center at Harvard, Verne has spent the past 4 decades helping companies scale. He's the author of Start to Scale, the greatest business decisions of all time, Scaling Up, or what used to be called Rockefeller Habits 2.0, and a Scaling Up Compensation. Verne, great to have you. How's your day so far?
Good. I'm here in broadcasting from Barcelona. So what could be better than Barcelona, Spain? My home.
And is it nice and warm out there?
It is. And it's why I'm here. 300 days of sunshine.
Amazing. Do you guys ever get winter or?
In the 16 years I've been here on and off, we had one dusting of snow and it shut the entire city down for the day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Schools were shut down.
I was in New Orleans when they had the 100-year historic snow that week in January, and literally the whole city was shut down, including the airport, for 3 days. They didn't have a snow shovel, let alone, any kind of road cleaning equipment. So
Absolutely. That happens. So let's dive into it. People are waiting. I know a few people have been watching, including my brother was super excited for this for this conversation. He's live now. He probably could see it and listen to us. So let's dive into it. What is your story?
the short of it is my dad built a significant company, then went broke. He and I then went into business. In college, I helped scale up about a $12 million firm. We rode the Pizza Hut wave. And then I launched in '83 Association of Collegiate Entrepreneurs, then EO, scaled that. And today we're 300 coaching partners, 6 continents, a company called Scaling Up. I launched in 1997 and about 140 million system-wide revenue.
Fantastic. And how did you get us started this whole coaching piece? Was there like an idea or moment or something that sparked it?
Yeah. Well, as part of founding EO, I then launched its executive program in partnership with Inc. Magazine and MIT. But it was only for the entrepreneur, Mustafa. And they would get all excited with the ideas that we'd present. And they'd go back and hit this wall called the rest of their leadership team. And so when I decided, hey, had our first child, one of 4, that maybe I ought to get out and do something bigger. And so that's when I launched Scaling Up, mainly for us to coach the entire leadership team, to become the McKinsey for the mid-market, if you would. And so that was the impetus.
Fantastic. So who do you guys serve today and what do you do for them?
Yeah. So today we've got about 4,200 clients in any one day. And our single deliverable is how do we help you scale the valuation of the business? And we particularly work with clients that have a vision towards wanting to get towards 100 million or more in valuation. Now, you don't have to have a lot of EBITDA. We sold recently a company with just 3 million in EBITDA for 90 million, but they had some secret sauce. I was just on a call with a team out of Madrid. Their revenue's only 4 million, but we identified some secret sauce that they've got that they can go run with that we think will allow them to have that piece of the business scale to a significant valuation, even though their $4 million business is probably only worth 8 or 10 million right now. So our focus is how do we help you scale to a significant valuation, whether you want to use it for acquisitions, exit, or legacy.
What kind of kind of secret or nature give you like a 30 multiple on your exit?
In their case, they were a staffing company. They staffed in a very particular niche. Get this, pharmaceutical packaging. And they had figured out, and I don't want to give away the secret sauce, but they had figured out a way to be able to, at any one time, have 4,000 candidates available for positions in that particular unique space. And so who bought them is like, wow, the fact that you have figured out a way to have that many candidates in that kind of a narrow niche, if we can bring that to our broader range of niches, that's going to be worth hundreds of millions of dollars to us. And so all you have to do is find one buyer, one strategic buyer that either wants to acquire you to keep you from working with their competition. We have a client that was 28 million that Raytheon bought, mainly to keep them so that they wouldn't work with Lockheed, General Dynamics, and their competitors. Or you've got this key capability that it's cheaper for them to buy it than it is to try to spin it up inside their own organization.
Interesting. Verne, what would you say are like some of the challenges that you help your companies or your customers overcome? And what are they experiencing that they come to you and be like, I need help?
Yeah. Well, that's where we settled on kind of a 4-decision model. And by the way, it's not just us saying it. We could play a little video clip of Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, still the largest market cap company in the world. NVIDIA's had a little tough time, so they've fallen back. And Tim Cook says he really only focuses on 3 things. That is people, strategy, execution. And then we know growth sucks cash. Apple doesn't have a cash problem, but growth companies do. And so our 4th is cash. And so those are the 4 areas that you generally have challenges or constraints. And so we've got tools and technologies that help you figure out, all right, what is the constraint in the people, strategy, execution, or cash? And then how do we help you fix that?
Love it. And how did you come up with your framework, with the scaling up framework that you have in your book?
Yeah, it really came from Jim Collins' work. I lived in Boulder for many years. Jim is in Boulder. And in his book, Good to Great, he said, look, if you want to go from good to great was 3 times good. And by the way, we think you ought to have 3 to 5 times industry average profitability. That's really your mark that you're a great, small, privately held, maybe family business. He said, if you want to go from good to 3 times good, you need disciplined people. And so there's people. And by the way, then we have coaching to help with that discipline. You need disciplined thought, and that's strategy. That's really setting the strategy. And that requires learning. So we have an online corporate university. And then you need disciplined action, which is where you execute. And there, he said, you use technology to accelerate that. And we have a tech platform. And then later on in his book, my favorite Jim Collins book, by the way, is not Good to Great or Built to Last. That was written about Fortune 500 companies. But his last book, which was Great by Choice, where he looked at us mere mortals and what did it take for us to scale. And it was finally in that book that he addressed cash. And my favorite chapter is the return on luck chapter, if you want to take a look at that relative to cash. So people, strategy, execution, and cash.
Beauty. And when did you write the first draft of Rockefeller Habits?
Well, I was writing it that whole decade. I launched that MIT program in 91, and I released the first draft in 2001. So it was kind of a decade of effort. It officially published in 2002.
Okay, and then back in, I'm guessing, 2018, you came out with Scaling Up, which was like a upgraded version of Rockefeller Habits, right?
Yeah, it's the Rockefeller Habits were originally, Mustafa, just 3 fundamental disciplines.
Uh-huh.
If you're not scaling as fast as you think you should, it's generally because of 3 things. Number 1, priorities. You're working on too many things or the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, data or metrics. Do you have the information you need to set the right priority. By the way, you and I were talking about Dan Heath's new book just as we were preparing. Dan's book, Reset, has this great term called guess-a-thon. He says, and we've seen it, so many companies in their quarterly planning or their weekly meeting, they're really just guess-a-thons. They don't have a clue what they're talking about. So you need that data in order to know. And then number 3, it does you no good to have all that information if you don't get in a room and talk about it. So priorities, data, and meeting rhythm really became the 3 Rockefeller habits, if you would, of my first book. Then in 2014 is when I released Scaling Up. And we thought, you know what? Mastering Rockefeller habits had a lot around execution. We need to really add deeper strategy and cash and people tools. So that's when we upgraded it.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Give us an example of a client, kind of like a case study that you worked with. Tell us about the challenge that they had and how you helped them and kind of where they are now.
Yeah. Gosh, we've had 102,000 clients. Let me take you to Sydney, Australia. Because I was just down there. I just saw her again. Naomi Simpson, a company called Red Balloon. She was an ex-Apple marketing executive, so quite sharp, and she had just launched the company when she came to my first 2-day workshop in 2005. By the way, Scott Fuqua, who went on to co-found Atlassian, worth $80 billion, he was also in that workshop with Naomi Simpson, and they were small as well. They had just started. And one of the but Naomi had only been able to sell about 7,500 experiences. Her company, Red Balloon, said, we want to change the way people gift in Australia. Rather than gift stuff, chocolates or flowers, let's gift people experiences. And so she launches with all this fanfare, but she'd only sold about 7,500 experiences. And here's the clue. Customers should be calling you, not you having to call customers. Your phone should be ringing off the hook. NVIDIA has no problem making sales. Their only problem is keeping up with those sales. That's when you know you've nailed strategy, is when revenue is coming seamlessly. And it wasn't for Naomi. So I said, all right, what are your 3 brand promises? And the godfather of influence, Robert Cialdini, said, if you want to convince somebody to buy your product or service, you want to give them 3 reasons. 3 is better than 2 or 5 or a list of 10. So I go, Naomi, what are the 3 reasons they ought to buy your experience through you? And she rattled off what the 3 were. I could share it later. And I said, all right, but something must not be right. If that's the case, you only have one thing to do. And that's go out and see the work yourself. Go hang out with customers. My buddy David Risher took over as CEO of Lyft, and he's driving a car every week, meeting other drivers, talking to Brian Chesky with Airbnb. Couldn't figure out what was wrong with Airbnb. So what did he do? Went and lived and worked out of Airbnbs for 6 months. So to wrap it up, she's talking to a friend of hers saying, hey, how do you like my new company? And he goes, oh, I love this, and I love this. It nailed the 3 that she thought, but he'd gone direct in buying the experience, a hot air balloon experience, instead of buying it through her. And she goes, why did you do that? And he said, because of all this other stuff you do, it must cost me more. I must be paying more if I buy it through you than if I go direct. And she realized right then she needed to make a different promise. And that's where everything starts. What is the promise of your business, your product or service? And so what she promised, she ended up calling it a pricing guarantee, or it was a pricing guarantee. You'll pay no more. Not that it's less, but you'll pay no more and get all of this other great stuff if you go through us. And then she was smart and she branded it a pleasure guarantee. And overnight, Mustafa, she went from 7,500 experiences to almost 400,000 in the next 36 months. So I think our help with companies making sure they've nailed the right promise that is going to resonate with the market and cause the phones to ring is, I think, something we're really good at.
Cause the phone to ring. It's amazing. So the three things you mentioned are, or the thing you mentioned was 3 brand promises and 3 reasons why people should buy your stuff.
Yeah,
And I'm
those are the
guessing,
only promises. Yes.
yeah, I'm guessing 99.9% of businesses don't have that figured out.
Um, the
A
good
very
ones do.
large. The
The
good
good
ones
ones
do,
do.
but yeah, but most of them don't.
That's right.
They just say, I'm good. I'm good. I'm awesome. Buy my stuff.
Well, and if I can, let me give you an example
Okay.
that maybe everyone, at least in the United States, and a lot of folks around the world are familiar with it. About a year ago, there was an article in Harvard Business Review about branding. And it said the most effective brands are those that communicate a measurable promise, both make a measurable promise and communicate it. And they opened the article with 3 insurance companies that we're very familiar with: Allstate, Nationwide, and Geico. Now, Nationwide, their theme is we're on your side. Like, what does that mean measurably? Allstate, you're in good hands. I sort of get a sense, but it's not really measurable. Which one, though, does Warren Buffett own? Geico. And that's
Geico.
for a reason. What's Geico's promise been from the beginning? You will save 15% in 15 minutes. Very measurable, and they communicate that. One last example. I don't know if your listeners know this. I just read about it again in a book over the weekend. Domino's, their stock in the last 15 years has outperformed the 3 A's: Alphabet, Amazon, and Apple. And what was at the heart of their early success? A very measurable promise. We'll deliver it in 30 minutes or less, or it's free. It wasn't this kind of nefarious, mushy. It was, no, we're going to deliver it in 30 minutes or it's free. Now, they got in some trouble later on, decades later, so they changed it. But your ability to make a measurable promise and communicate it, like Geico, like Domino's, and like Oracle, a big technology firm, is really key to making the phones ring. And so when Naomi said, hey, our guarantee is a pleasure guarantee, that caught everyone's attention. And that means you're going to pay no more. Very measurable. That's when things took off for her.
Fantastic. Yeah, I know those make a huge difference when you have your promise right, and it's something people they can read and feel. They could see the results, and they could feel it. Then it becomes easy for them to make a decision compared to I'm awesome, buy my stuff.
You got it.
So I know on your book, Scaling Up, there is a page specifically with some blue background about strategy.
Yes.
Is that the page people need to kind of go through to kind of figure out this piece here?
It is. And we actually have a particular tool called the 7 strata of strategy.
Yes.
What I wanted to do is, you noticed as you mentioned, I'm the Global Scaleup Fellow at Harvard. It's really the Harvard profs that have nailed strategy, plus Gary Hamel in Chicago. And so we took the best of Michael Porter and Francis Frey and Gary Hamel and Jim Collins, and we put it into a unified theory that, if you walk through that, is going to help you better discern exactly what that strategy should be that you would nail. By the way, I feel like, given kind of who your listeners are, maybe I should give one more example, if that's helpful.
Okay. Yeah.
And because you probably have a lot of professional services firms that are listening.
Yeah, we have Entrepreneurs Inc. 5,000 people.
Exactly. And a lot of you are saying, hey, I can see making a promise if I'm doing pizza, right? Or Southwest Airlines low fare. But I want to take you to Andreessen Horowitz. You're familiar with them. They're probably the number one venture capitalist in the world. Mark Andreessen, who founded Netscape, and Ben Horowitz. And they have 3 measurable promises. And most people think, how could a venture capital firm have that? And what would they promise? And all you have to do is go to A16Z, that's the shorten of Andreessen Horowitz, and go to their About page. And the second paragraph makes the promises, which is we're here to show respect to the entrepreneur and the company building process. And we've got the network to help you. Now, how does that translate? Two very measurable things and then something soft. First, they decided to go at the market different than everyone else. And that is, we think the entrepreneur is critical to the business, and that it's easier for us to teach you how to be a CEO than it is to pull you out of the business and bring in an outside CEO who probably doesn't have the same care and soul. And we'll come back to that question. You and I were talking about the soul of the business again as we were preparing. So how is that measurable? You can tell how many of the founders that are in their portfolio are still the CEO of the organization. And by the way, the fact that they have a high percentage makes entrepreneurs, particularly successful entrepreneurs, fall in love with them and give them first look at their deals. The second promise to show respect. I don't know if you've ever tried to get with any money people, but there's sort of an arrogance. They're like, hey, we have the gold. And if we've set a meeting for you, if we're a little late, you can wait. At Andreessen Horowitz, every minute any of their partners are late to a meeting with an entrepreneur, it's a $50 a minute penalty per partner. Now, come on. These guys are super rich. It's a drop in the bucket. They donate the money to charity, but it's the message that it sends.
We're going to be
we're
on time.
Here to serve you. We respect your time. And then the third one is that, hey, we have such a network that we probably have the resources necessary to help you scale the business. Those are their three brand promises, and they're stating them right in the second paragraph of About A16Z. So every company can do it.
You know, it just remind me of an example I heard from Dan Kennedy talking about a doctor of sort made a VIP program for his patients. And the promise was, if your appointment is at 3:00, you're going to be in at 3:00.
Yes.
Because you always go to the doctors, you're waiting between an hour to 5. You know, it's a long time to wait. And then the promise was, you know, you go in at 3 and people started signing up.
Yeah. We have a dental client out of the UK. And here's what I think is important to differentiate. Making a promise that I can clean your teeth properly and make sure the filling doesn't fall out, that's not useful. If you can't do that, don't be a dentist. So that's what we call table stakes. But what this dental practice promises is three things in reverse order. Number one, or number three, we answer the phone quickly. Number two, exactly to your point, you are seen on time. And then number one is, and you didn't feel a thing. And look, if you think about it, what's the one thing I fear most about going to the dentist?
The needles.
It's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. And they promise, by the way, you're not legally allowed to even promise that in the United States, which is really bizarre, but they can in the UK, and they promise it and they deliver on it.
Fantastic. I think Canada is the same. They can't. I don't think the dental offices can promise no pain.
Right. Exactly.
I think that's why the sedation industry or the sedation dentistry is very popular.
Oh my gosh. I didn't feel a thing when I had my 4 wisdom teeth pulled out and 2 of them were impacted. It's unbelievable the drugs that they have.
Oh yeah.
Felt
they
so
knock you
good.
right out. Then they could do whatever they want.
I know.
So, can you give us some tips on what people on that strategy page? Because it's an extremely important part of business. I mean, it either you make it or you don't, based on the strategy, I guess.
That's right.
Give us some strategy or tips on how we should go about strategy.
Yeah. And first, I want to comment. You know, Jim Collins had said people, strategy, execution. we do put strategy first, not in the book, but we've realized that if you don't nail strategy, you don't even really know who to hire,
Yeah.
and who else to bring in. I realize it takes people to set strategy, which is Jim Collins' point. So maybe it's a useless debate. You need both. But when it comes to strategy, the single most important thing is to answer one question. And that question is, what is the job to be done by your product or service for the customer? So I'll give you an example. We've got a client in India that has all kinds of MBA schools. And there's a lot of companies, organizations that provide MBAs in India. But they don't see that their job to be done is just to give you an MBA. They precisely see their job as this: to help every MBA student of theirs get the right first job that propels their career. That is a much more precise and better job to be done than we make sure that you earn your MBA. And so nailing that job to be done. And the video we have everybody look at is Clay Christensen's Job of a Milkshake. And I could share a couple of examples from that, but it's a thing they did with McDonald's. And the point is, if McDonald's thinks they're in the business of making milkshakes, among other things, that was their fatal mistake. The job that milkshake did was something very precise for people in the morning, different for people in the afternoon. And only when McDonald's figured that out did they know how to innovate properly. Otherwise, you're just wasting a lot of time. So, and the only way you're going to figure out the job to be done is to go hang with customers. You can't figure it out sitting alone in your office, humming in lotus position.
Or talking to advisors, hoping that they would give you the answers.
Yeah. And our only answer, and that is why David Risher's out driving cars and Brian Chesky's out working and living in his Airbnbs. And why Elon Musk, probably to me, the most important video, we could almost show it here, or you could pull it up and share it with your audience. Mark Andreessen did a video a little while ago. He's an investor in several of Elon's companies. And the question was, how is Elon able to run 6 companies?
Yeah.
You would say, and get all this stuff done inside our government. And Mark detailed how.
Yes, I think I've seen that video.
You have. And so maybe you could share, or I can share, or maybe your audience.
Yeah. What was his name again? I could pull it up.
Yeah, Mark Andreessen on Elon Musk. It'd be really fun to share.
Oh yeah, give me a sec. Doctors. Mark. His first name is Mark.
Yeah.
And then
Andreessen is so hard to spell. A-N-D-R, like E-S-S-E-N-N. I think there's 2 E's.
I got it. It's a 13-minute video.
Well, the segment I've been showing is only about 2 minutes, but
you have a 2-minute version?
Yeah,
so he's on Mark Anderson's. Yeah, Mark Anderson's on Chris Williamson's podcast. But just for the interest.
No, this happens to be him just talking into the screen. Well, maybe it was a clip because it was a virtual interview.
Hold on.
Anyway, here's what he said. He said and by the way, he said Elon does it the way the industrialists 100 years ago did, like John D. Rockefeller, Charles Schwab, Bethlehem Steel, and the like. So I thought it was interesting. Mark tied it back to the very titans that we kind of built our work around. And he said it's very simple. What Elon does is he shows up at each of the 6 companies and he goes right to the trenches and he sees the work directly. He talks to the people on the front line that are actually doing it. And then all they figure out is, what is the constraint? What is the one thing, not the 5, not the 3, what's the one thing we've got to fix this week in each of the 6 companies? And then all he does is do that for 52 weeks. And if you can fix 52 of the right things in your business, then it's going to scale. But the key is
Yes.
it can't be a guess-a-thon. You can't be sitting in your office. And as you guys, if you've read book on Elon Musk, he would grab his pillow and his blanket, and he would go move out and sleep under a desk out by that part of the factory and stay there until they figured out how they were going to fix that constraint. As he went from 1,500 cars to 6,000 cars per week in 6
Hmm.
months. So that's the key. You've got
Yeah.
to go see it with your own eyes to figure out the job to be done or the constraint.
So great point you brought up. Fixing a big problem a week. By the end of the year, you have fixed 52 massive problems in the company. So
That's
the
right.
question then becomes, which problem, like you said, are we going to focus on? Do you have any tips on how we should go about figuring
Yeah.
out the 80/20 on problems?
There, I am so excited about this new book by Dan Heath. And look, I read everything Dan Heath writes with his brother Chip. In this case, he wrote this book himself, and it's called Reset, How to Fix Things That Aren't Working, or some subtitle like that. It is the first book, Mustafa, who actually provides 6 ways that you identify what is the real constraint. And then several ways that you go about in a practical way fixing it, in many cases, in a week. And so it's rare. You're probably the same way. Most business books, maybe the first chapter, or I'll read the last. I just read a book this weekend. The only good chapter was the last chapter. And I kind of scanned everything else. Dan Heath's book, not only did I read every sentence, but a coach and I spent a whole bunch of hours together in a car down in New Zealand. We re-listened to the whole book because we wanted to understand it that deeply. So Reset by
Interesting.
Dan Heath. I consider it the most important execution book written.
And that's the book with a yellow cover.
It is.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I just found I never actually I read a lot of books, but I never heard of Dan Heath. And thanks for that. I'm gonna check
Well,
it
you
out.
probably heard of Dan and Chip. They wrote Switch and all kinds of very famous books. They've got a half a dozen #1 bestsellers, but Dan's the best. He's out of Duke.
Duke, England.
No, Duke University. His
Oh,
brother
okay.
Chip is at Stanford. He's at Duke. And together they do brilliant work, brilliant research.
Wow. Let's talk about so gang, if you're watching or listening, pick up Reset by Dan Heath for execution.
Please.
And I'm gonna pick that up. I'll
And
put
constraint.
that in my list.
Yeah, I'm figuring out what is the real constraint you should focus on this week.
Beauty. Yeah, Vern, one of the questions that was asked by the audience was, in your book, there are a ton of books that are mentioned.
40.
What's that?
40 different books.
Yes, there are a ton of 40 of them.
Yes.
How do people go about that? Because there is a lot of books. Almost on every page, there's a book that is mentioned, and I'm just exaggerating. Should people read that? Should they read those books, or how do people go about consuming those books?
Yeah. My recommendation is that you divide it up among your leadership team. If you've got 5 or 6 on your leadership team, that really means each of you just read 5 or 6 books and you've pretty well consumed what it is that you need to consume. And by the way, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, they read a book. He reads a book every 2 weeks. Bill Gates reads a book every week. And Mark Cuban, I've known Mark since his early days with this little IT services firm in Dallas. It wasn't until he wrote his book, Mustafa, that I learned that, and I still, know Mark, that he reads 3 hours every day. And all he's doing is looking for one idea that could help one of the 150 plus companies he's invested in or he owns. So leaders are readers or listeners. I like listening to books on Audible. So just divide and conquer is how I would do it within the organization.
What's your suggestion or I guess take on reading and being able to apply and implement what we read. A counter argument to
Yeah.
reading is I'm reading so much, I'm not learning and don't get time to implement the whole thing. And next thing I know, I'm reading another book.
Yeah.
What's the best way to go about that so that people are not overwhelmed with information and they're not getting fatigued with all that information, not being able to apply?
Yeah. It's the same with life. There's a video I've been showing of Tim Ferriss's where Tim's talking about how effed up his life is and how much he screws off and how unorganized he is and in a way undisciplined. But the key to his success is not 5, not 3. It's picking one thing to accomplish every day, then picking one thing to accomplish every week, and then picking one thing to accomplish every quarter. I could go on and on. So that's our key to reading a book. Just pick one thing from it that you think applies immediately.
Oh, okay.
And then here's what drives me crazy, Mustafa. I'm attempting to learn golf, to play golf. How often do you have to review the fundamentals? Every stroke.
Yeah.
Right now, Scotty Scheffler is the number 1 golfer, in the world. I was glad to see Rory finally win a tournament again. But Scotty, every day he practices, and before every round, he has this molded 5-iron because he knows the grip is the first and most fundamental thing you've got to get right. Second is the first 20% of the swing. So what does that mean to us? It drives me crazy when somebody says, I ask, hey, did you read that book? Oh, yeah, I read it like 10 years ago. As if you mastered it.
Yeah.
You can't master anything
Right.
in one reading. I am going through Elon Musk's biography for a 4th time because every time I pick up
Something new.
thing. And remember, you can't cross the same river twice. So when I listen to it a 3rd time, my company's at a different place and I pick up a different idea. So don't stress. It's what Mark Cuban said. He only looking for one idea.
One idea.
Out of the 3 hours he's reading or listening, not 3 or 5. That's the key.
So how about this? Based what I've seen in your book, if we say match the idea to the number 1 goal that I'm trying to achieve this quarter or this year, be like, what's one idea out of this book that can help me reach this main goal that I'm trying to reach? That would fix a lot of the overwhelming problems with information, I guess.
It does. And it's one of the reasons why we color coded the book. And even up in the corner, it's color coded around people, orange, strategy, blue, execution, brown, cash, green. So the first thing, and we have a set of assessments that help you figure out which one of those 4 should I focus on next. You really can't work on all 4 simultaneously. And then all you have to do is go to that chapter in the book and just review, all right, we think it's a people issue. And we've got 3 chapters in that people section. We think it has to do with our leadership team. So all you have to do is read those 3 pages. So go to the source that you need. The good news is we've got ChatGPT and other AI that can help us with that as well.
100%. We talked about, I guess, title of the show was why only a few companies scale and the rest don't.
Yeah.
Give us a few pointers on that, on why that happens and how.
Yeah, some interesting data. There's the last data I saw. There's 11,000 startups every hour in the world. Every hour. Wow. We're not hurting for new companies. There's just too few that are actually able to achieve escape velocity and get into orbit. And so I wrote a chapter called The 3 Barriers. And by the way, nobody has to buy the book. They can go to scalingup.com. Right next to the picture of my books is the free growth tools, free chapters, including the barrier chapter, and even a free 1-hour video, 15 minutes on each people, strategy, execution. And they're not lost leaders. They're not ticklers. You can really learn a lot in those 15 minutes. And in the barriers chapter, I identified over those 10 years 3 things that get in the way of people scaling. Number 1, what's between your ears. The reality is we're the biggest constraint. Can we think big enough? It's not knowing what we don't know. It's knowing things we think we know that aren't true. It's leadership development. And that's why leaders have to be learners. It's why, you guys know, Satya Nadella came into Microsoft and said, we've got to move from being a know-it-all culture to a learn-it-all culture. And that's real. So you've got to keep learning. Number 2 is scalable infrastructure. Can you really get the systems, the processes, the office space? People seem to be coming back now to the office, which I think in some ways good. Can you get all of that scalable infrastructure in place in order to handle the chaos that comes with adding people and customers? And then the third is marketing. And it really, Mustafa, comes down to all the functions matter, but marketing's the key to scaling. Because what marketing's job is to get you new employees, new customers, new attention by the media, new investment, whatever it is that you need more of to fuel whatever it is that growth. And so that's why marketing is such an important function.
So what's between your ears and scalable infrastructure and marketing are what's causing. I think with most businesses,
it's the lack of those 3.
The lack of those, yeah. Especially with first one, what's between your ears. I think, and you could correct me if I'm wrong. A lot of businesses, we try to get the entrepreneur out of the way so we could grow the business. It's like,
well, and that's been the myth in Silicon Valley, which is why Andreessen Horowitz stepped in and said, wait, the founder cares more than anyone else you're probably going to bring in. By the way, my weekly insights, I share always 2 quotes. I'm going to quote Craig Newhouse this week, who founded Craigslist. Death is my only exit strategy. and by the way, he points out that, Steve Jobs was there to his death. Bill Gates is still at it. Mark Zuckerberg's still at it. The Google boys have come back in to Google and try to save their baby after missing out on ChatGPT and AI. So you can't replace the soul of the business, the founder, easily.
For sure. So what I meant was,
that's why we have to educate them. That's why we have to educate
100%.
Mark Andreessen does.
Mostly it's like the mindset thing. We're like, let's do this, and like, oh, I'm not comfortable with that. Let me think about that. We're like, bro, it's been 6 months. You've been thinking about it. You really have to do this. let us go on and let's test this. And if it's not working, we'll go back to your way. But your stuff,
Well,
I don't mean to like fire them.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons why. We're adamant. No one's ever achieved peak performance without a coach. No sports figure would ever think to achieve what they've achieved without a half a dozen coaches. And so we think part of that leadership development is you can't coach yourself. You can't see yourself. And so you've got to have, and that's why Bill Campbell, the $1 trillion coach, as the book was titled, proved so effective in Intel and Apple and Genentech and Google.
Right. Extremely important to have a coach. And to your point, I think I remember hearing Tiger Woods. He had multiple coaches, and for each aspect of his game is what I heard. He had a separate coach.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what helped him get to where he is, or he was.
Mustafa, enough said.
No more.
Got it. Got it. That's all you need to say is
got it. And
Probably would.
sometimes people say, and I've it's like, oh, did you run $100 million company? And then I'm like, well, did Tiger Woods coaches, were they all number one ranking on the golf tournaments? No, but they helped Tiger Woods get and become who he was, or the rest of the people. As long as I think, as long as the coach is good and knows how to coach and has experience, I mean, obviously, it's good to have $1 trillion coach, a guy that has ran $1 billion company. But at the end of the day, we want results. And correct me if I'm wrong on that.
No, you're absolutely right. Bill Campbell himself never ran any companies. Bill Campbell was a former high school football coach.
Bingo.
And we see in sports, the best players make absolutely the worst coaches. You've seen it. They buy teams and they want to go. They're disasters.
Right.
So, yeah, we run into that all the time. Same with industry expertise. Our whole point is, if all you do is think like everyone else in your industry, then you're going to do the same as everyone else in your industry. And we know Michael Porter's research at Harvard, the only people that win big are those who do everything different. They price different, they hire different, they deliver the product or service in a different way. The key is to be different. Example I've been using, which industry did Elon really tap into in order to build Teslas and rocket ships? The toy industry. That gave him more insight into how to build a Tesla and a rocket ship than anything else. It's that cross-fertilization of ideas. And so what we love about coaches is those who work with multiple different companies and industries are going to be much more useful to you than somebody just in your industry. Now, I don't mind you having a coach also in your industry. You should have multiple coaches like Tiger Woods.
Absolutely. So we talked about leadership and the soul of the business.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that? You said you wrote an article on that.
Yeah, it's my next piece in Chief Executive Magazine. And where it came from was, Brian Chesky made the famous speech in Silicon Valley last August. Paul Graham was there, the founder of Y Combinator, and he wrote that famous blog post, Founder Mode versus Manager Mode. And his warning was that, and Brian Chesky was railing about the fact that he hired all these managers and they almost killed the company. And that even the new CEO of Starbucks, Brian Nichols, said, I think what happened is Starbucks lost its soul. When, for instance, it quit offering ceramic cups for people that were inside, and now they're giving ceramic cups again back inside Starbucks. And so what I did is I wrote a column called The Soul of the Business. And here's the essence. You can outsource. You can delegate everything but the soul. And when it comes to the soul of the business, we're trying to, as coaches, trying to get CEOs out of things, but I'm giving the CEO, the founder, permission to micromanage, to be an a-hole for a moment if they need to, when it comes to the soul of the business. So let me just give you an example. I get a call from a guy, Jack. He runs a $600 million construction company. And I said, it's taken him 30 years to get up there. And he calls me up. He wants to talk to me. I'm going, what's going on? He's not a client. He just heard that we're good at what we do, and he wanted to have a phone call. I said, all right, what's happening? He said, well, I'm trying to turn the business over to some younger leaders I brought in. I've been at it for 30 years. I'm kind of looking at retiring. And I go, yes. He goes, and it's not working. I go, well, first, what's the soul of the business? And he goes, I don't know. So here's the cheat question. What's been the key, not the 5, but the one key that's gotten you to this point, 600 million in revenue? He knew, Mustafa, the answer to that immediately. He goes, through pandemics, through the Great Recession, through supply chain challenges, we do very complex construction projects. We've never missed a deadline. I go, yeah? He said, we've missed 4 deadlines in the last 36 months. I said, Jack, I give you permission to go back into your own company and be a bulldog, be a micromanager, and get the company back on track. And that's why Steve Jobs, the soul of Apple, was designed. Steve wouldn't even let an ad go out unless he studied each word in that ad. And he would be blamed for being a micromanager, but he had nothing to do with trying to figure out how to get 10 million phones into stores on Monday. That was all up to Tim Cook. He didn't care about making any of this stuff. They outsourced that to Foxconn. But when it came to design, Steve dotted every I and crossed every T. Now, I thought when Steve died that Apple would die. I really did. I bet against the stock.
Yeah, I've been surprised with that too.
But here was the key. And this is what I said to Jack. Jack, you can't free yourself up from your own company until you find another person as obsessive and good at the soul of the business as you. And they don't have to be the CEO. And he knew immediately who the guy was. I said, that's who you need to go back in and empower. Who was that inside Apple? Johnny Ive. No, that was Johnny Ive, the designer. That's who Steve Jobs had lunch with every day, if you believe Walter Isaacson's biography on Steve Jobs. And when then Steve died, who carried the torch? Who carried the soul? Johnny Ive. And Johnny was there for 10 years up until 2021. And during that time, Mustafa, Apple's valuation, what? 10x from 300 billion to 3 trillion. Now, when Johnny left, there's about a 36-month idea to market cycle. I don't think Apple's put out anything exciting since. Now, there might be a better Johnny Ive in there. I don't know this for a fact. But that's the key. What is the soul of your business? And you as the founder have to remain maniacal and micromanaging in that aspect of the business. I give you permission. Delegate and outsource everything else. And you can't free yourself up till you find somebody better than you to do that.
Love it. That was a great question. What's the soul of the business? What's the key that got me to this point?
Exactly.
Great question. Great question. I shared the same concern with Apple and Microsoft when both Bill Gates got out and then
Steve
Jobs died. I didn't think these guys would survive, and now they are the second, third highest net worth companies on the planet.
Right.
I was like, how are these guys even? Like, how did Tim Cook continue growing the business, market evaluation, and the whole thing? And
by the way, you know what Steve Jobs' last decision was?
What was it?
He learned at Pixar the power of just doing one thing every 2 years. He came back and did a computer, then he did the iPad, then the iPhone, then the iPhone, then iPad, iPod. Anyway, you guys know the sequence. He now knows he's going to die. You got one last heroic move. And what was that? Apple University. He brought in the dean from Yale and said, look, you've got to codify what is really, I'm going to say, the soul of Apple, so that we teach the Apple way to everybody, not just Tim Cook that comes into the company. That's why I come back to the number one barrier to scale is learning and development. And that's what Satya Nadella did to turn Microsoft around.
Beautiful. I have an audience question, and they're asking, what advice do you have for younger people that are starting out with your framework, since there is so much to learn and there are four main different aspects? How should they go about learning these different aspects for running a company and the whole thing?
First, don't read Scaling Up.
Okay.
That's why I wrote a new book. It came out last year called Start to Scale.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really the starter book, much easier to read. It's also the right book for all your employees to read. Do not give your employees Scaling Up. It's it's like a
They're going to
graduate.
get confused.
They're going to get confused. And I open Start with Scale with the story of Dave Rogan-Mosier and how he used our tools and which ones over the weekend that he started the company. You know the company today as one of the top AI firms in the world, Jasper, which he raised 125 million at a 1.5 billion valuation. But when he launched over a weekend, he used our tools to do that. And the key first thing to do is, what are the top 25 influencers that I need to get behind my business if I want to scale it? And that's what I learned from Regis McKenna, who coached Steve Jobs, Intel, Genentech, and me. And that was a question that Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and everyone used all along the way in Silicon Valley. Who are the 25 people that can help me? And that's what Dave Rogan-Mosier did, was he made a list of 50 that weekend and got 48 of those 50 to help him. And we're talking about a year pre-product.
Yeah. Love it. I think that's the idea. It's, I'm sure you're familiar with Chet Holmes, right?
Yeah, I loved, well, rest his soul, rest his soul.
Yes.
He
Yes.
was a dear friend, and his daughter's been carrying the torch.
Yes. Troy Aberley's watching. He's at high on the.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, he works with Amanda. And then so he had that Dream 100 idea, which seems to be the similar top 25 influencers that you want behind your business. That just remind me of that.
Absolutely.
Beauty.
Yeah, and by the way, the bigger companies, Greg Brenneman's got a list of 400. The late Sam Zell had a list of 400. We've got a list of 525 there. And by the way, the key to Tom Cruise's success, I could not figure out, Mustafa, how this short dude, with all of this controversy behind him, is now the highest paid actor
in the world
on the planet. And I found out it's the Tom Cruise bunt cake. Tom has the list of 250 key players in his world. And every year, if you're still on his list and you didn't upset him, or you did him a favor and you got added to the list, you get the famous Tom Cruise bunt cake. And we gave them out to our list one year. It is the most delicious thing you have ever tasted, Mustafa. It's only $99 too. And by the way, when he launches a film, everyone who's going to touch that film gets, he literally, when he did the latest one that was shot in Great Britain, he loaded up his plane with like 500 bunt cakes and flew them so that everybody on the crew could have a Tom Cruise bunt cake. Don't underestimate the power of gifting. Giftology, Beyond Giftology just came out, the late John Ruhlin's book last week.
Gifting. All right. So we're out of time. Let me ask a couple of questions and we're going to wrap it up. Give me 2 of your favorite books of all time.
The Magic of Thinking Big. It was the first book that my dad ever gave me, and I got to meet the author. And then I still think you can't beat Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich.
Love it. What's one advice that made a massive impact on your life or business?
It's no doubt Regis McKenna. Make anything you need to accomplish, make that list of 25 influencers and work the list.
List of 25 influencers. Beautiful. This has been a great conversation, Verne. I learned a ton. I'm sure the audience got a lot out of it. Where can people find out more about you, what you do, and reach out and get in touch?
Scalingup.com. And go there and you'll just see a lot of free resources. Please take advantage of those.
Scalingup.com. Gang, search for it. Scalingup.com. There are a free chapter of the book. There's videos. There is downloads. You can tap into Verne's knowledge and wisdom and their system. I have read Scaling Up. I'm looking at the book right now.
Yeah, thank
I've probably read it like 3 or 4 times.
Oh,
and it is amazing. I can't get enough out of it. Like you said, every time I read it, I get something new out of it. Quite a few times I go back and I want to review an example or, look at the framework and see how you explained, say how you did the strategy page or whatnot. It has been working for me and a lot of businesses. So Thank you very much. You've been listening to another episode of the Executive Hub. Yours truly, Mustafa Hosseini and Verne Harnish. Hope you guys have a great day, and we will see you on our episode or on our next episode. Thank you, and bye now.